Let's look at some examples of automated production lines. We'll look at three. So the first one, let's start with Coca-Cola because we looked at it in chapter 7. And ultimately what we want is if we get a question on the exam asking for a contemporary case study, we've got one. Now we don't need to be an expert on how something's made exactly, so we're just going to look at the main parts of the documentary watch, which was National Geographic Mega Factories. So the bottles were brought into the factory, that's kind of the first stage, and that was done by a large conveyor belt. We saw the bottles were made from little test tubes called prefabs. They were turned into big bottles, and they went in or came in by a big conveyor belt. So no human interaction there. We've replaced it or automated it with a machine. Next, the labels were put onto bottles. It's actually not quite the right order here. I've got it a little bit out of order. But we'll remember, if we watched the documentary, there was a machine. It's going so fast that this picture's blurry. You can't actually get it to stop without being blurry. And that's because the bottles in the background are being fed in blank. And this label maker, or this label machine, is putting on one bottle per time and doing it very, very fast. And in the exact same spot on each bottle each and every time. Next, the bottles were filled with Coca-Cola. Again, we used a machine for that. So in this case, we saw the big, kind of like a big Ferris wheel going around, and every time, every rotation, it filled each of these bottles up to exactly 600 millimeters. Not any, no more, no less. It has to be spot on, and it did it very, very fast. Then we put lids on the bottles. Again, that is done by a machine. So again, it's a bit blurry because it's going so fast I couldn't stop it. But you can see here, this machine, the bottles don't have lids. It then passes it to this machine and it is putting the lids on. And lastly, the bottles were loaded onto trucks, and there was kind of a series of steps there. So first of all, there was what they called a palletizer. It put the Coca-Colas into slabs of 24. Then there was another little machine that wrapped them in the shrink wrap plastic that we see. And then there was another machine that put the slabs into a pallet like this. And then it loaded the pallets on top of each other, and then it wrapped it around in plastic. It went around in a big circle. So totally automated production line. What about with a service? Well, services also, where they can, like to automate things. So if we look at the documentary we watched from the Alfred Hospital, the patient's vital signs now are monitored by a machine. So we've got blood pressure, heart rate, and so on. More accurate, doesn't need a break. It's going to work 24/7. That's a very, very good way to monitor vital signs. What else? Things when someone's having an operation, say, or needs oxygen, that is done not by hand or by estimation. It's done exactly by a machine to an exact standard. So that could be dispensing of oxygen or, say, anesthetic during an operation. And another one is when we see the patient down here being administered fluids and medicines. Yeah, once upon a time done by a human and sort of done, done almost like by not guessing, but sort of to a certain human interaction there where they estimate when to give medicines and so on. Well, that's all automated now. The machine will drip feed the medicines and the fluids to the patient at the exact rate. Lastly, we're going to look at Tesla a lot. So we've got another example. So we saw lots of automation there. So these giant 20,000 pound coils of aluminium are actually what the Teslas are made out of. It can be very difficult to get humans to move them, or maybe humans with machines, but it's still very complicated. So they just have a big machine that moves it from one part of the factory to the next. What else? Making the panels. They go in this aluminium into this sort of little stamping press here. It pushes down and it makes each of the panels, the doors, the windows, etc. Then the chassis or the body of the car needs to be put together. We can't see one human here. This is all done by robots or machines, putting the sides on and then the roof on, etc. Then the painting, once the chassis is put together, not even the painting is done by humans. It's done by these robots here that spray paint the car to a certain color. We've got moving of the chassis around the factory now. It's quite heavy. You can see it's been painted red and it's got to be moved around the factory. We can see this line here. It's kind of like a little tram track, and it's just a machine is designed to control and move that car around to the next stage of production without any human involvement. Putting the seats in, that is also done by a robot. And putting in the windshield as well. So we've got the windshield of the cars, not just the windshield, but the windows and the rear mirror, and for some Teslas, the sunroof. That is also done by a robot.